Welcome to the Sports Idiot. I am your host, Johnny Disco. Today, what is the deal with soccer leagues? How cool is pickup soccer? And should the punishment for flopping be a kinky mess? All that and more. I am Johnny Disco. I am a sports idiot. It's illegal to do a podcast now.
She's not a horse person. She's a person horse. People like to be choked. Something we like.
Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in to the Sports Idiot studio here in the Sports Idiot shed. Today, before we get into the episode, I just want to do a couple cheeky introductions for some of my friends up here with me. Over here to my left, I have the Wise Owl from the class of 2002. Wise Owl, do you want to say hello? No, not. You don't want to say anything to our fans. Hi. So, okay. So, Wise Owl from the class of 2002. She's a 41-year-old woman, lives alone. She was the valedictorian of her class, the class of 2002. She really took a lot of inspiration from the song by Vitamin C called The Graduation Song, right? As we go on, we remember. It's set to canon in D. She played it in the background, and by your words, you said there wasn't a dry eye in the house.
Wasn't a dry eye in the house.
She was a senior when 9/11 happened, so she brings that up a lot too. Over here on my right, I have the Denver Bronco cheerleading baddie. How are we, Denver Bronco cheerleading baddie?
Wonderful.
Wonderful. That's nice. Tell me why.
I just signed a 2-year lease.
A 2-year lease. Look at you. That's a long time in cheerleading world. So Denver Bronco cheerleading baddie, she is 33. She's been with the Denver Bronco cheerleaders for a lifetime in cheerleading world, which is 16 months. She is optimistic about the future. 2-year lease, really.
Really?
This week, we're going to be talking about a little sport called soccer. Over in Europe and pretty much the rest of the world, they call it football. But here in America, we call it soccer. And we're going to be getting into what we find confusing right now. How old were you when you started playing soccer? Most kids get into soccer when they're 3, 4, 5 years old. I have coached youth soccer, and it's a great sport for kids because you really can't mess it up. You just roll a ball out there, let them kick it around, and whatever happens, happens. So I want you to imagine a situation. You are, let's say, 5 years old, and you are playing pee-wee soccer. Now, that means every Saturday morning, you and your family are going to have to wake up early. You're 5, so you're already up early, but your parents are going to have to get up early, and you're going to have to go to a local park. Starting around 8 a.m., that local park is going to be a beehive of activity. Families, kids, they're all in different colored jerseys. The fields all have numbers. Everyone's kind of lost and disorganized. All of the parents, they look pretty good, right? They're wearing top quintile athleisure, perhaps even business casual. They're in there, what up? I'm a cool young parent. I guess we're doing the soccer thing, but I'm still cool and I'm a little bit alt. Those are the parents you'll find at parks across America on Saturday morning. Now, let's say you are really good at pee-wee soccer, okay? And you get selected to be on an all-star team. So you start as an all-star, and that's just in your little town. So you might go play other towns' all-star teams. Maybe it's possible you might go play at the state level. Just like the 2012 Avicii song, there are levels to soccer. So let's say we are that same kid. We were 5 and we were good at soccer, and now we're 14. We've grown up a little bit. We just finished middle school. You are still a soccer phenom. People love watching you play. And you've been selected to be on your all-state soccer team. So now you are one of roughly 15 to 25 young men or women representing your state. So you would then go to a big countrywide tournament. Now there are teams from all 50 states. Maybe it's not all 50 states, maybe it's 45 states. There's all-star teams from 45 different states. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids. And you guys play each other and they see who is the best team. And then they might say, okay, we're going to pick an all-star team from all of these all-star teams. Who were the best players in this tournament? And let's say you get selected. So now you are on the national soccer team for 14 or 15-year-olds. Later that year, perhaps there's an international tournament. You get to go play with all of the other all-stars from those nations across the world. And you finally get to see, wow, I was a really big fish in a pretty big pond, the United States of America. But now I'm playing with kids from Brazil, from Germany, from France, from England. Some of the best kids from those countries, and little old me, a best kid in America, I'm not even in the top 100 best kids in the international tournament. And that is only at the young age of 15 years old. You can go up from there. There are teams that play all across Europe at 16, 17, 18 years old. And when you get to the upper level, you are playing against all the best players in the entire world in a super league with all the best teams. And that's just a little taste of how much you can zoom out in the world of soccer. There are levels to this game, and in the confusing section of our soccer episode, we want to talk about some of those levels, the leagues that you see when you watch soccer on TV. So, to begin, let's just set the scene a little bit about the sport. So, soccer, similar to American football, is played on a big rectangle. Like many other sports, it's a rectangle sport. And in this rectangular sport, soccer, we are 11 on 11, just like American football. The field is a little bit bigger than an American football field. It's 115 yards by 74 yards. We are playing with 11 men per team, men or women per team. There's one goalie, and there are 10 what are known as outfielders. So when you look at a game of soccer, it's a lot of people out in the field running around, chasing this ball, trying to possess it and kick it around. And then you have one person standing in the goal, trying to make sure the ball doesn't go in the goal. How the game is played is my team of 11 is trying to score more goals than your team. Something to note is that a soccer game can end in a tie, and many soccer games end in ties. It's very common. 0-0, 1-1. A traditional score would be like 2-1 or 3-2. There was a big game, something called a World Cup game about 8 years ago between Brazil and some other country, and Brazil got 7 goals scored on them, 7-0. It's like the shame of Brazil. It was like super duper unheard of. The goal is 24 feet across and 8 feet high. So it's actually quite a large space. The ball that soccer is played with, you're probably in your head, you're like, yeah, it's a sphere. It's a ball. But that would be wrong. The geometric shape of a soccer ball is called it's called a Buckminster Fullerene. That is the name that people ascribe to a soccer ball. Sometimes they call it a bucky ball. And that comes from the visionary architect, Buckminster Fuller. He pioneered the geodesic domes that you see from time to time. I've never known anybody that lived in a geodesic dome, but I don't need to know them to know them. You have a friend who lives in a geodesic dome, you pull up, they have the corduroy pants rolled up, they have the crunchiest, fattest woolen socks you've ever seen. They're wearing the Doc Marten lace-up sandals, right? Their shirt is not cotton, some other material. You can't really quite process what material they're wearing on top, but they're also wearing a smock. A lot of beads, a lot of rings. I don't need to know someone who lives in a geodesic dome to know someone who lives in a geodesic dome. It's like, hey, welcome, guys. Come on in. Let us begin by bowing our heads. I don't even want to go inside of your geodesic dome. I'm sure it's really domey in there. I'm not trying to go in there, right? Good job, Buckminster Fuller. You invented a house for crazy people. The other name for a soccer ball, because the geometry people were like, you know what? Buckminster Fullerene, it doesn't really roll off the tongue. As you can see, I'm stuttering saying it. Can we come up with something a little more geometry sounding? And someone raised their hand and they were like, what if we called it a truncated icosahedron? And people were like, that's what we're talking about. That's a geometry name, a truncated icosahedron. And then the Buckminster Fullerene crowd is like, well, I think we already have a great name, and it's honoring one of our favorite geometric architects. I don't think we need to call it a truncated icosahedron. The soccer ball, which you can see up here above my shoulder, it is 12 pentagons connected to 20 hexagons. But it makes a sphere. It's a sphere. And if you're ever in like a sports trivia night, they might say, what is the shape of a soccer ball? And you would say a buckyball. Or you could also say a truncated icosahedron. The trivia person will probably be like, you know what? We're taking both. A very important thing, you're not allowed to touch it with your hands. It's called a handball. The goalie can pick it up with their hands. Everyone else, it's all feet. So I want you to imagine this. We have an hour and 45 minutes to run around. Only using our feet, we have to get the ball into that goal. And we have to get it around 10 other dudes, and then we have to get it past this one final dude who's allowed to use his hands. So for that reason, soccer is called the beautiful game. And when you see soccer at an elite level, it really is quite beautiful. Another cool part is you can't use your hands, but you can use your head. And you see that all the time. You can use your head, you can use your chest, you can even use your shoulder. They don't count shoulder as the arm. So people are doing all kinds of crazy things with the ball. They're just not touching it with their hands. Where is soccer primarily played at the elite level? And that mostly takes place in Europe. There are, in each country, a top league. So that is a collection of teams. A league is a collection of teams, and each country has their own elite division. So in England, they have the EPL, the European Premier League. In Germany, they have something called the Bundesliga. Bundish, I think, means people or something. I'm not sure. Volk also means people. So they're kind of confused. I remember I studied abroad in Germany, and we went to the Bundestag, which is the parliament building. I might be confused with the Reichstag, but they have two buildings side by side, and the Bundestag looks like a power plant. I remember I was sitting in the tour, and they were like, what does this look like to any of you? And I was like, it looks like a power plant. And they're like, yeah, that is right. That is good, because this is the power plant of the Germany, of the Deutschland. Fun Germany fact also, their national team, when they play, they don't like saying Deutschland, because that's just too long and it's not efficient. So they just say Schland. They go Schland, Schland, Schland. And I think that just speaks to the efficiency and economy of the German people, right? They all put their heads together and they're like, should we go Deutschland? And they're like, no, it's just too clunky. Another fun thing about Germany is, they started and lost 2 world wars, so they do not go for nationalism. They do not like outward expressions of national pride. The only time they fly the German flag, what they call the German tricolor, on the Bundestag and the Reichstag is when the national team is playing soccer. That's the only time they're allowed to show patriotism, is when their soccer team is representing them on the field, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. I mean, we fly the American flag all over the place in America. They've started doing something where the new model cars have the backwards American flag, like the Jeep Grand Cherokee is charging into battle. Let's take it easy on that. I don't think the Jeep Grand Cherokee with the Timberline trim is hard charging into a battlefield. I think it's in the farthest right lane on a busy road because that's where the preschool is. So we've talked about how the game is played. We've talked about the levels that Avicii had envisioned when he wrote the song Levels in 2012 about soccer. But there are 2 levels that we haven't discussed yet. And to get additional clarity on those levels, we need to go to a true spotist. I only know so much. So for that, we're going to go to our very first interview on the Sports Idiot podcast, an interview with the Monji. Here we go. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We have here for the very first time, in the flesh, the Monji. Hello, Monji.
What's up?
So, ladies and
gentlemen, you might want to introduce me as my actual name. I don't think many people know me as Monji. In fact, only you know me as Monji.
That's a good point. Okay, so let me just do a little intro, everyone. This is Monji. That's his full name. It's the Monji Man. This is Tedmon from the Island. And Ted, I just wanted to I have a little quick intro written up here. Your name is Tedmon. You are from the Island. You have no hands, you have no pants, you have been several places in this world, but most of all,
Mhm.
your heart stays on the rock. And
Always.
you've done it again, again and again, again and again and again and again. You've done it so many times. Everyone is like, when is he going to do it again? And he's done it again. And he's simply
Yes.
done it. So that's, and did I miss anything?
No, that's me in a nutshell. I think you nailed everything. There's not much else to me than
The
that.
Monji. So Monji, for all our friends at home, Monji is one of the original Spotists in the world, in my world. Someone who just had a deep knowledge for sports. We now these days we're so accustomed to being able to turn on the TV and see sports, or have it on your phone and see sports. But Monji, I wanted you to dive a little bit into. There wasn't a time so long ago that it wasn't so easy to get sports information on your mobile device. Am I right?
No, yeah, totally. I mean, not until the smartphone.
So,
And
but
that's actually one of the reasons why I stay on things like Instagram. That's where I get all my sporting news, really. Like breaking news, it comes on Instagram for me. I don't really use Twitter, but a lot of people use Twitter.
interesting. And before things like Instagram and Twitter, there was something called 1-800-555-TELL.
Yes, I think everyone. I mean, do we even need to talk about it? I think everybody knows about this obscure phone number that we would call.
So,
And who knows if they were hacking our information or what? But that's how we got our scores.
so back in the day, guys, in the early 2000s, before the smartphone, you would have to call a number, and it was 1-800-555-TELL, and it would be like a newspaper over the phone, and you'd have to, but Manji, it was like next, or what did you say into it?
You could get weather or you could get sports scores. You might have been able to get something else, but I think it was just weather and sports scores. And you would go on there and you would say sports, and then the automated voice would say which sport, and you would say we would say MLB, and of course you would probably have to say it a few times because it would get confused, and you would end up yelling MLB into the phone. And then you say your team, and then and it would do this thing after you said your team. I remember the sound; it would go ding, 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 as it was like computing what you were saying, and it would then be like the Yankees crushed the Phillies by a score of blah 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 blah. It was that. It was calling that number or finding a television. One of us who had a television and cable, and going to ESPN and watching the ticker and just waiting to see your score. So this was a way better process or thing to do to get sports scores. Because where we did this, people don't know, is where we meet up in the summer in Michigan, and we didn't back then we didn't have internet there. Like maybe one of us had cable. So it was literally like to get sports scores. It was this phone number or getting the newspaper and seeing the scores that way. It was a different time. It was a way different time.
So when we were kids, I, being a sports idiot my whole life, was always like, man, these guys really deeply care about these sports games because they're calling this number and saying next, next, and they really wanted to know. And I always appreciated that. I was like, man, I wish I, had that burning desire. So the Monji
Yeah.
comes from Bermuda, the Rock or the Island. He is, his name is Teddy, but he goes by Tedmon, and then Tedmon is from, of course, the island. So it's Tedmon from the island. Monji, growing up in Bermuda on the Rock, you had a lot of exposure to European football, soccer.
Yeah. Yeah. That is the sport of choice on the island. It's the most popular sport, specifically the English Premier League.
The English Premier League. So, from the segment, we talked about how all of these countries have their own hierarchical leagues. I've called it in the episode. I've called it European Premier League a ton of times. So I've messed it up a ton. I'm a sports idiot. The English Premier League. So those are going to be the like Manchester United, Liverpool. Give me some other ones.
Manchester City, Chelsea, yeah, all the big boys that you hear of are in. That's the top league in England, and England has a tier of leagues, right? So the Premier League is the top league, and then it goes all the way down to all these different leagues. So for instance, I don't know. I mean, I know that show, Welcome to Wrexham,
Hmm.
on FX. I'm sure a lot of people have watched that. It's a very good show.
Hmm.
And, it centers around a small team, a small market team called Wrexham. And they are in a league called the National League, which is like the fourth league down. So it's Premier League, it's the Championship League, it's the League One, League Two, National League, and then it goes down from there. And depending on how you do in those leagues during the season, you can move up or you can move down, which is called promotion or being relegated.
Yeah.
So it makes it. I mean, I think it's a great system. It's a system that we don't have here in America.
Mm.
I think it works perfectly. It makes everything exciting, right? Because even if your team is not doing well, it's not a lost season because you're really hoping not to get regulated.
Mm.
Sorry, relegated.
Both, Monji.
Relegated. And so it makes, even if it makes every game count, even towards the end of the season where you're like, we suck. Well, it's like, well, no, because you don't want to go down the league. You want to stay in the league you're in. So it becomes really important. We don't have that like in America. If your NFL team or your baseball team sucks, it's like, well, that's it. I'm not watching anymore. Like, why even watch? This is just like a waste of time to watch. We're in the bottom of the league. We're like one of the worst teams in the league. Like, we're not going to the playoffs. So it's kind of a broken system, I think,
Yeah.
in America. I really think the tiers are such a good idea, and it works. It works really well.
Would you say that in Europe and adjacent England, soccer is the equivalent of American football here, professional football?
Without a doubt.
Okay.
Yeah. Without a doubt, that is the sport. England, UK in general, and then all of Europe. That is the sport for sure.
And these are not like Wrexham, for instance. Wrexham's a town, right? It's a place.
Yeah, it's actually Welsh.
Oh, so it's in Wales. So that's cool.
Yeah.
All throughout the United Kingdom, there are these little towns, and each one has a football club or a sporting club or something like that. And they're all like 100 years old, and it's like the pride of the town. And sometimes they're in disarray,
Yeah.
and it's an opportunity like Wrexham, and you get some, celebrity endorsement to come in and kind of, rework it.
It's No, I mean, that's what's really cool about it. I mean, you have like a small town, like who has ever heard of Wrexham? And now all of a sudden, they lucked out because they had two celebrities, McElhaney and Ryan Reynolds, buy the team, and they then plugged them into an FX show. So they've really lucked out. They struck gold and hit the lottery. But it's what's really cool. It's like, you have this town with this club that has been around for over 100 years, that this small town just loves and cherishes, and now they're on a national stage, and you have people from all around the world now traveling to Wrexham to go see this team. They have this like massive fan base. They were sponsored by TikTok at one point. I don't know who they're sponsored by now, but and they're climbing. I think they climbed in 2 years. They climbed 2 tiers, so which is not easily done. It's rarely done. But it just shows you what money can do. But also, if you like some team in the National League, which is the 4th tier down, there is that hope. Like, hey, maybe we'll play in the Premier League one day. There was a team called Luton Luton Town that did the same thing, and they still play in this tiny stadium. And they're all of a sudden launched into the Premier League, and they're playing against all the big boys, the Manchester Uniteds, the Chelseas, the Liverpools, and their stadium. It's so funny. I mean, you can Google it. It's like this small.
It's like in
stadium
the
that is
up to houses, right?
It is right next to houses. It's literally, I think it shares a wall with townhouses, but it's all of a sudden, on this national or on this worldwide stage. So that's what's so exciting. Like, that's what, and these people are so passionate about their teams, and that's the dream, is to get to the Premier League and stay up there.
I mean, every sport, it would be so interesting. I mean, the farm system already exists in baseball, and each program has, their kind of farm on down. But gosh, I mean, imagine if you could have these regional teams that contended with the bigs. And,
Yeah.
I just feel like there's no entry point for the regional small market, the Wrexhams.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, these teams have been here for ages in England. These soccer or football teams, whatever you want to call them, they've been there. So they've built this. They have these fans, these generational fans, and so to just start that like that might be hard. It gets really complicated because there's also a lot of money involved, and
Mhm.
especially in baseball where there's no salary cap and money kind of rules. The more money you spend, the more successful you are. So if you're like this, I don't know, team, you make a team in Biloxi, right?
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
how you gonna climb the ranks. It'd be really hard. I don't know, it'd be really complicated. And obviously the minor league system in baseball is so different. Those are tiers, but like those teams all stay in the minors, they don't climb up, and they're really there just to serve the major league
Yeah, it's like a
affiliate
factory.
teams
Yeah, just
to
produce.
develop players for them and to get them in the big. So it's a completely different system. What it could work for, which I think would be great, is if they did it for college football and they had tiers, and instead of having all these different conferences like the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, the Pac 10, it's like they could just have one super league, like the top tier league, and have the nation's top schools playing that league, and then there's a tier 2 and a tier 3, and you can climb up and down that
Yeah.
season to season depending on how well you do.
And that's actually leads us into an interesting conversation. So there are in all of these European countries and countries throughout the world, there are top leagues, but then there are leagues of the best teams of those leagues
Mm-hmm.
go and play in kind of like
Mm-hmm.
a super league, which is
Totally.
called the Champions League. Is that right?
Yeah, so there's the Champions League, there's the FA Cup. So, if you take, for instance, Manchester United, who I just watched, they play in the Premier League, the top league.
Mhm.
And, they also play in the FA Cup. And maybe this is a good example, but, they've played in what is the Champions League. So they have this, it's not just a one season thing. These teams play in kind of these different, I guess, seasons you can call them, or tournaments. So,
Yeah.
a team will play in their league games, and then they'll play, if they're lucky enough, if you finish top 4 of the Premier League, you go in the next season, you go into another league called the Champions League, and that's the top teams through all the leagues of Europe, and they all play in a tournament together, which is really fun.
Hmm.
And then there's also something called the FA Cup, for instance, and that is a fascinating tournament or league. They talking about the tiers. So all the tiers, I think it goes down to, like, I don't know, it goes well past the national
Mhm.
league at 4 tiers down. It goes well down. So every team in the English Football League, they play in this, no matter how low you are. They play in the FA Cup, and they can, the teams who are like 9 tiers down can play Manchester United. They're all thrown into it,
Wow.
and they all can compete together. And and it's basically the top club, or the one club wins it all, no matter what tier you're in.
Wow.
Usually it's the big boys, but you have some Cinderella stories. But it's really cool. It just gives, like, these fans of, like, oh, Manchester United's coming down, or we're playing Manchester United. Like, that's
So cool.
that's a really exciting thing to do.
So just to paint a more like colorful picture for the listeners, if you are your team, so for everyone back home, people have their teams in all sports, but in soccer especially, or European football, English football, people have their clubs that they are dedicated to their whole life, and they'll fight people in the street over it. It's a big deal. So your team, Monji, is Manchester United.
Yep.
Yep, and that is
And
one.
your team is?
It would be technically Liverpool, but I don't know much about them.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
My
Jewel
dad,
does. Jewel
my
does.
my dad, Jewel loves Liverpool, and so I guess that's my team. But so there's Manchester United, there's Liverpool, there's Chelsea, there's Arsenal. Those are all teams in England, the UK, abroad. For the Champions League, those big name programs would then go play
Mhm.
the top 4 teams in Germany, which might be FC Bayern, or who are the other
Bayern Munich.
yeah,
Yeah.
Munich. And so then also they'd play the top 3 or 4 teams in France. So Paris Saint
In
Germain.
France,
Yeah, so you would
right?
see in the Champions League when that's on TV, you would see huge name clubs playing huge name clubs from other countries. Typically, they
Yeah,
don't interact like that. Throughout the normal season, they're all playing within their own countries. And then the FA Cup is a UK wide, like country-wide tournament where every team plays, and sometimes you get some really low, kind of small town
yeah,
going up against the bigs, and they might just pull off kind of a wonderful Cinderella
yeah.
story out of nowhere win.
Totally.
Very, very cool. One thing I wanted to,
Totally. Yeah. Well, what I was just going to add, yeah, tacking on to that, and then like Italy, it's, Inter Milan, AC Milan, you got Spain, Barcelona,
yes,
Real Madrid. And that's just, we can't really do that here in American sports because, we're so locked off, no one really plays American football.
this,
And baseball, is a little more global,
mhm,
but it still doesn't really work. We're kind of an island when it comes to sports.
yeah, yeah.
So which is I think so important that we get involved in.
And one thing I wanted to call out, all of these things are happening simultaneously, right? Players will fly
Yeah.
all over in a week.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, you have these tournaments going on at the same time. Like, it's not just like, oh, it's not in different times of the year that these tournaments are
Mhm.
happening. It's really generally happening within, between August and then into May of the following year. And yeah, and then on top of that, JD, you also have international play.
Yeah.
So there's international breaks where international soccer happens, and players will depart from their teams to go join if they're on their national squad, they'll go join their national squad to go play. So it's a lot. Like it's a lot of games. It's a long season for some of these players who are fortunate enough to be playing in all these leagues. But not every player is fortunate enough. Not every player plays for their national squad. Most players don't play for the national squad. A huge majority of players don't play in the Champions League.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of games, but it's a privilege.
Well, if you're a soccer fan, you have a lot of, uh, you
Yeah,
know,
it's what's great.
there's so much soccer. I remember my high school soccer coach got the special dish package for the Bundesliga because was a German teacher and loved all of German football. So he would like have kids over from Germany that were, at the boarding school to watch whatever team they wanted. Just crazy, you know, B
Yeah,
second tier German soccer. Um, so
yeah.
they're all going on, and so that's something that I always find really interesting about soccer. So just to elaborate on that, the all of these are called clubs. All of these the names we've been mentioning, but players will play for club and country. So they'll all be playing together wearing, their Manchester United kit, and then there'll be the international break, and then all of those same players who were friends on and they play together on one team, they'll all get then sorted out into their national teams. And so you'll
Mhm.
see one of the biggest names in the world, Cristiano Ronaldo, whose Instagrams are always like, "Let's have fun." He will. Have you ever seen his social media, dude? It's so bizarre. Him
Yeah,
and
it's
Messi, it's
insane.
always like, "What a great night!" 75 million
Yeah.
views. You guys are so weird. But he, plays for wherever club, but then he goes to Portugal. And Messi plays for whatever club, but then he goes to Argentina. And so in international play, things get super duper interesting because now it takes on a whole nother angle. It's not just for the pride of your club and being in like the top league and playing in the Champions League. It's like, if you win a World Cup, the FIFA World Cup, which happens every 4 years, similar to the Olympics. I mean, that's like you have to have that if you're going to be considered, one of the greatest of all time. Don't you think?
Well, yeah, and that argument was made with Messi, before, he won the World Cup with Argentina, last World Cup. That was the argument. That was the last trophy, he hadn't gotten.
Mm,
And so, I mean, it's crazy argument to make because it comes around once every 4 years and it's
mm.
so highly competitive. Winning a World Cup is so hard that, to have to win one to solidify yourself It's crazy, but that's what a lot of people think, and that's what a lot of people said. And lucky for Messi, he got it.
FIFA, when FIFA comes around every 4 years, that's the pinnacle. That's the height of the sport. Would you agree?
When you say FIFA, you mean like the FIFA World Cup?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
World Cup.
yeah.
FIFA is a
Yeah,
non-government
yeah, yeah.
organization that's around all the time. FIFA is always there. Yes,
Always there.
World Cup.
Always there. But yeah, the FIFA World Cup. Yeah, it is. I think it's the pinnacle. I would have to look at the numbers, and I don't take me. But I think it's the biggest sporting event. I think it's bigger than the Olympics, the Summer Olympics.
I think it might be the number one spot in all global sports. Like there might be a weird cricket event or something that some kind of
right. Cricket is such a wrench. Like it is so funny, man. It is like you want to call soccer the most popular sport in the world. I mean, it might be cricket, from all what I've heard, but I don't know. We'd have to look at the numbers on that.
We're gonna have to do a sports idiot.
I mean, it's crazy. I'm pretty sure soccer is considered the sport of the world, but I mean, cricket is crazy popular. But yeah, I would have to look at the numbers. There's the Cricket World Cup, so and then there's also the Summer Olympics that eclipses the Winter Olympics, from what I believe.
Yeah.
But I think the World Cup is the top dog.
Well, and to put it into some perspective, like the Super Bowl gets like 140 to 160 million a year. I think the record is 170. The World Cup gets in the billions. It's like, a very measurable percentage of the US or the world population tunes in to that game. Like I probably already mentioned this in the episode, but like wars cease to happen. Like civil wars stop in African countries because they're like, okay, we'll figure this out in 2 months. It's FIFA.
We got to pay attention.
It's FIFA.
Yeah. Do you have you don't have an assistant in the studio that can pull up these stats for us?
In the Sports Idiot studio, in the Sports Idiot shed? No, it's just me in here.
Yeah. We gotta wait for Nelly to get a little bit older.
Climb the ladder and just fall over.
Yeah.
So Monji, thank you so very much for being our very first interview. I think this was very fun and enlightening. Hopefully all of you guys we are now headed into our very final segment, something controversial. Monji, you're going to like this. Hey guys, we just wanted to take a quick break from all the action and talk about this week's unpaid advertiser. So as you guys know from last week, once a week we talk about an advertiser that hasn't given us any money. And in this case, it's actually quite the opposite. We give them lots and lots and lots of money, and we have for several years, and that is our good friends over at Costco. This week's unpaid advertiser is Costco, that little mom and pop shop that likes to do bulk discount buys all day long. It's my favorite place on earth, you guys. You need to get over there right now. Get in there, flash your card, scan your card. They just added that. Scan your card and go to town. I'm just going to walk you guys through my typical Costco experience, right? I walk in, flash my card. On my left, they're going to have seasonal items, right? And on my right, huge TVs. And that's by design, you guys. That's not an accident. Me, as the male part of my family dynamic with my wife, I'm looking at the TVs. I'm looking at the 95 inchers. I'm looking at the 105 inchers, and I'm working backwards. Okay, how many months of rent would we need to miss to have a 105 inch? And while that's going on, my wife is in the seasonal stuff, just going ham, right? She's buying the shampoo 4-pack or the storage bins, depending on the time of year. Hopefully we get through that section, we survive, and we get out into what I call the Serengeti. So that's the open field in the middle of every Costco. On your right, you're going to have a couple of aisles that you'll never go to, right? There's a whole aisle. I've heard about this. I read about it in a magazine. There's an aisle where they have dishwashers and washing machines. I've never been over there. I would never go down that aisle at a Costco, right? If I'm walking up towards the back and I'm looking on my right side, I might look at a towel or two. I might look at the bed sheets. I might look at the water pick stand aisle. There's a whole bunch of weird aisles over on that side. At the end of that side of Costco is the sports. So I'm always checking out what they got over there. And I think sports flows quite nicely into the shelf-stable vegetables. That whole section back there, at that point, you're out of the Serengeti. You're into what I call the Upper Highlands. It's where the meat is. It's where the baked goods are, the shelf-stable vegetables. You're right on the precipice of the Arctic tundra. And that's what's so great about Costco, guys, because when you go into a Costco, you're going to face several different biomes. It's not just a normal, standard retail experience. You have to go into the scene from day after tomorrow if you want string beans, if you want a lot of raspberries. You go from there over into what I call the towers. That's where all the cheese is, the microwave-ready meals. Those are the towers. You guys know what I'm talking about, right by the Roti Chicks, the rotisserie chickens. Now we're getting over onto the fun side. Now things are starting to get interesting. We go all the way back because that's where the toilet paper is, the bottled water, the dish stuff. There's an aisle back there I don't ever go on, and that's where they have the Ziplocs and the Solo cups. You don't need that much stuff, right? One thing about Costco, you really need certain situations to facilitate the total purchasing experience, right? If you are going on a bachelor party with 20 people, yes, you go to the Solo cup aisle. But if you're just a family of 4, you only need to go to that Solo cup aisle once in your whole entire life. You might bequeath those Solo cups to your kids, right? Your kids might be fighting about who gets the rest of the Solo cups or the trash liners, right? I went to my grandmother's funeral and she left me her trash liners, and I was touched. I was moved by the gesture. Moving down towards the lotion area, we're going to have candy. You're always going to have your candy. You might need to jump over the flower bridge, go by the flower display to get into the Nutland, and sometimes Candyland. That's where you're going to find your protein bar, also called Barland, and your protein powder land. And then, guys, you're wrapped. You're trying to navigate the lines, right? You typically at Costco have to bring your own weapons for the line experience. They don't provide weapons. It's that cutthroat to get into those lines. But once you breeze through the line process, which is always actually really fun. Once you get up to the people, they're always just, it's like, hi, my name's Terrence and I've worked here since 1993. And they've seen everything, They have a 10,000 yard stare. Like, I've scanned so many millions of dollars worth of sausages. We love Costco. Oh, wise owl from the class of 2002. Have you ever been somewhere and someone's bumped into you? No. You've never been somewhere and someone's just accidentally bumped into you? Well, I guess. What did you do? Nothing. You just kind of got bumped and then went about your day? Yeah. Do you harbor resentment towards that person? Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Have you ever been bumped? What are you going to do when someone bumps you, right? It's that age-old question. Do you say something? Probably not. I think we all have a friend or two that might say something. And when you're in those situations where you're like, man, I wish my friend was here who would say something to this person, but I won't. That's typically how it goes. Someone bumps into you, you kind of get agitated. They might even throw you a, oh, hey, sorry, right? When I've ever bumped someone, I'll always be like, oh, sorry, pardon me. And they'll be like, yep. Now imagine somebody bumps into you and you, fall to the ground. You grab your leg and you're like, and the person's like, whoa, what's, are you okay? What happened? And you're like, and then a ref comes over in their fun little suit and they have a whistle wrapped around their hand in some weird way. And they reach in their breast pocket and they pull out a yellow card and they put it in your face. And you're like, what? I barely bumped into this person. And the ref's like, I don't care. It's a yellow card. And that is the nature of what we find controversial about the sport of soccer, and that is flopping. Flopping is a cancer in all sports. It's disingenuous. We don't like it. So what is flopping? in the sport of soccer, as I mentioned, it's a pretty low contact sport. There's some times where people are kind of running and grabbing onto each other, but a growing trend in the game and in other sports over the last several years is when there is minimal contact, you then pretend that the contact was very serious. Here's just a couple examples on the screen here. I usually go and pull these later, so I'm just going to generically talk about them. Boom, right there, as you can see, right? There's the contact, and there's the reaction. That's flopping. We don't like that. That seems lame and unfair. So why do people flop? Why do coaches say, hey, if someone hits you near the face, act like they punched you in the eye? And the reason, if the referee just sees the reaction, it's possible that they might think, oh, this must be real. I am going to punish the other team. In the sport of soccer, there are 2 levels to punishments. One is called a yellow card, which is like a little warning, and it's kind of fun. It's an actual physical card. It's like a little laminated card that the ref trots out of his pocket, and they'll kind of dig around in the pocket, and they're like, what do I got in here? What do I got here? It's like, oh, no, I don't need a Halls. I don't need my breath mints. This is my vape. I don't need my vape. Oh, there it is. There's the yellow card. And they pull it out, and they hold it up for the whole world to see. The other option is a red card. Bum, bum, bum. And that means the guy has to leave the game. They're done. They're kicked out of the game. Expelled. So when someone gets a red, that means it was probably a pretty hard foul. There's other times where someone might act like a hit was bigger than it really was. On the soccer field in Europe, they call it a pitch. They're like, on the pitch, there are two big small rectangles inside the big rectangle, and those are called the box. So typically those are at about 18 yards. If a foul is committed in the box, typically the result is what's called a penalty kick. So the ball gets placed, maybe I think it's 8 or 10 yards out, and it's 1-on-none. It's a guy kicking and then the guy in the goal. Super fun part of soccer. Sometimes when it's a tie in a big game like a FIFA or a UEFA, it'll go to shootout. It'll be decided by 5 players from each team trying to kick these goals, and then the goalie trying to, stop those kicks. Very fun. Very dramatic. So if there's a lot of play happening in the box and there's some contact, someone might then be like, whoa, he kicked me, hoping that the ref will give them a penalty kick. The problem with flopping is we are very attuned to what it looks like when 2 human animals bump into each other. We bump into each other all the time, right? It's a direct causation. There's no pause. There's no time to think about it. You get bumped, you kind of move. Now, there are animals in the animal kingdom that do a lot of flopping, right? One is the opossum, which I don't know if I'm supposed to pronounce the O. People will just be like, oh, look, a possum. And I can't tell if they're saying like the singular article a, like a possum. Should I say an opossum? That's crazy. That's something a crazy person would say. I do want to throw it up quickly to the opossum possum marketing department. I think they've done an incredible job, right? They're essentially glorified rats with disgusting tails and huge, weird mouths. But somehow their marketing PR team have put out a bunch of fun videos about how they're actually the good guys. I feel like they borrowed the marketing PR strategy from Daddy Longlegs, those spiders. Remember those spiders? And people are like, yeah, actually, they're the most poisonous spider in the whole world, but their fangs are too small to break human skin. And they also eat other bad spiders. So Daddy Longlegs are actually good. Remember that? It's the same thing with possums / opossums. They're like, yeah, they eat ticks and they don't have malaria or something, or they can't get rabies or something like that. And they have all these promos where they're like, if you see an opossum, it's not actually a pest. It's a helpful part of the ecosystem. And look, it worked, right? It worked. I feel like we need to get a marketing / PR department to change the face of flopping in soccer because it's not very noble. And sorry, possums and the marketing team, fainting and playing dead, it's not super honorable, right? We love you for what you're doing with the ticks. We love you that you can't get measles, rabies, whatever. But you gotta work on just rolling over and showing your belly. It's just not tough, right? If your number one defense is play dead, are you tough? I don't think so. And also, just a quick note to the Predators, like it was alive a second ago, and now it's rolled over playing dead, and you're like, oh, must be dead. I don't want meat that's dead. I saw it running around a second ago, but now it's dead, so What's the point? If you can't shake it, to death, what's the point? What's the point of even eating a possum if I didn't kill it? Other animals that do some dishonorable flopping, fainting goats, right? When they get scared, they just fall over. Same thing. Now, I want to ask the soccer world, the people in it that flop, the coaches that encourage flopping, do you want to be associated with an opossum and a fainting goat despite the opossum's marketing team? Probably not. That's not the animal that soccer players tend to go for, right? Often they'll be like, I am a lion. I am a gorilla. I am a shark. I don't know if they use shark, but they definitely use lion. You know who else loves to flop? Toddlers. Toddlers love flopping, right? They're just toddling along and they hit the edge of a table, and then a split second later it's like, ah, and then they start wailing. That's how you know they're tired, when they start flopping, right? It's like, uh-oh, there's a professional soccer player who's trying to get a penalty kick. Time for bed. Oh, and an eye rub. Uh-oh, time for bed. So, guys, obviously, I think flopping's got to go. It's really weird. When they're on the ground, like, screaming in agony, it's like, bro, we know what it looks like when someone tears their ACL and can't walk and potentially has lost millions of dollars and their whole life. It's not like well, it is, but no, it totally is. I've torn my ACL. It's really painful, but we know the difference, right? We know the difference. In America, we know the difference quite well because we watch super contact sport football, American football, all the time. For half the year, we watch huge guys bang into each other, and we watch it on super duper slow-mo. People bang into each other all the time. And there's no flopping in American football. You don't need to. I find it so funny because it's like these soccer players don't know that they're being recorded with like hundreds and hundreds of the best cameras on earth that can slow things down in 8K so slow. So it's like, what's in their brain when they're like, okay, if this guy bumps me, I'm going to really sell it. It's not going to work on the American mind. And so we need to find a way to get away from flopping. We need to disincentivize it. So this is where I give my solution to the problem. And this is something that I've borrowed from some parents of toddlers, and that is spanking. I think we need to publicly dress down these floppers. So here's what happens. Someone flops, the ref goes to the replay and it's like, yeah, dude, we have 1,000 frame per second replay. Like, come on over. They bring out a chair, right, with no arms. The soccer player lays across the ref's lap, and, you know, he gives them a couple whaps, right? Enough so that they're embarrassed. And we all get to laugh and point. It is no fun being on your belly across someone's lap and they're spanking your tush. Even if it's not hard, you know, even if it doesn't hurt, it's still embarrassing. Now, I know exactly what you guys are thinking. You're like, what if some of the players like it? And I can totally understand that. You know, some people generally speaking like being spanked. I feel like there's a lot of arenas where spanking at the right time is encouraged. I was in a fraternity in college, and ever heard of it? And we had to paddle each other with a frat paddle, right? One of these. And certain among us didn't hate it. I didn't like it. It hurt. But some of us were like, yeah, I don't really mind. So you're going to get some professional soccer players that the, you know, cursory, rudimentary spanking is not going to work. I think what we do is have a second tier where we bring the frat paddle out. That's going to weed out some of them, but there's still going to be the freaks out there who just are sadists or masochists, I never know which one's which, and they like being hurt. So I would then recommend a third option, which is a stern lecture. So if we find one of these guys, they keep flopping and they're like, whoopsie-daisy, I flopped. And they like flop and they just like go over to the chair. It's like, okay, I've seen this movie before. We need to set a second chair, right? We need to set out a second chair, and we need to have one of those elbows on the knees, heart to heart. I encourage the officials to use the word disappointment as much as possible. Hey, we're not mad that you're flopping. We understand why someone would flop. But we're just disappointed, right? This is a big game. You're a professional athlete. You make millions of dollars. All these people here are way poorer than you, except for the ones up in the suites. You know, we'll give you that. Some of those people up there probably have more money than you. But all the people down here in the seats, they didn't pay their good, hard-earned money to watch you act like a toddler. They could get that for free at the local YMCA. So this is my final thought on the sport of soccer at large, which is the topic of nudity. Every 4 years around FIFA time, there's some kind of nudity that happens. Typically, there's a streaker or two. Typically, a buxom woman releases the hogs, and it goes around the internet. If you go for every single FIFA, 2006, 2010, 2014, 2018, 2022, upcoming in 2026, and you just type in one of those numbers and a few choice words about the human anatomy, you're going to find some pictures of people having a good time in the stands. And I think soccer needs to run with that. I think no professional sport is cashing in on the nudity game, right? We all love nudity. It's not about, what you're into. We all have neuron activation when we see a lot of skin. That's just a fact. Like, why do you think Mardi Gras is so fun and famous? It's because you might see some chesticles. And I know all the people that go to Mardi Gras, they're like, yeah, that actually doesn't really happen. It's like, yeah, it actually does. Okay. In my head, when I think about Mardi Gras, it definitely happens. At the beginning of a HBO show, they kind of do the letters to give you a warning. When you see the N, are you not a little bit excited? I know you are. When it's just language, it's like, yeah, okay. Let's see what the episode has. Sometimes you get a BN, which is brief nudity. Typically, in my experience, that means it's just a butt. But when you get that N, it's like, let's go. What's it going to be? When's it going to be? What are we going to see on this episode? Guys, so I think soccer should lean into the nudity. I do have one idea that I could just throw out to soccer. They do this cool thing in soccer. I just want to call it out. When someone gets genuinely hurt, not a flop, and the ball is still in play, the opposing team will not take advantage of that. They'll kick the ball out of bounds. They'll stop play, and it's an honorable thing. And so I think you do balls out for balls out. Whenever that happens, everyone just goes balls out for a second. It's like, hey, we're all honorable here. We all have nothing to hide, right? We're not going to try and take advantage. This is a scrotum. Got to be careful, of course, with kids and all that kind of stuff, right? We don't want any situation like that. But I'm just spitballing here because I genuinely think if there's a higher opportunity for nudity, you might get some more people. All right, you guys, that brings this second episode to a close. Oh, Wise Owl, did you have fun? No. Denver cheerleading baddie, what did you think?
I thought it was wonderful. And if you heard from the Denver Bronco cheerleading office this week, just let me know. I just need to check in with them on I'm missing a few payments.
Okay, I will. I definitely will. So, guys, down below, we have a couple of buttons. Just give those a smash for me. Leave a comment. Leave another comment. Reply to other people's comments if you're so inclined. Share the show with your friends. We're going to have more episodes coming your way real soon. We hope you'll join us. I am Johnny Disco, and that was The Sports Idiot.